Morning, folks. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. As folks are coming into the space, we welcome folks to do a quick icebreaker in the chat. If folks can put in their name, pronouns, where they're from, what organization they might be with, and your favorite summer beverage or treat. If folks could do that in the chat as everyone's entering, that'd be great. And Cumbia, if you could move to the next slide, please. We do have a jam-packed agenda, so we won't, and a full house, so we won't be doing this icebreaker out in the open. So if folks could enter it into the chat, that would be awesome. And we'll start in the next minute or so, kicking off with our agenda. So again, thank you so much for everyone for joining in with us today for this exciting conversation, celebrating the anniversary of the IRA and having some deep and intentional reflection and discussion about its impacts in Latino, Latina communities. Beautiful. If we could move to the next slide, Cumbia, I'll go ahead and start things off. So really quick disclaimer, we are recording this Enuentro for folks who aren't able to attend the call today. If you have any issues or concerns, please private message myself or Irene and we can get that sorted out. But first of all, welcome everyone. We're opening the space and doing some brief housekeeping. My name is Dharma Santos Santiago. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the climate justice and clean air advocate based in Brooklyn, New York. And my favorite summer beverage is boba. I love boba, like an iced boba tree is my favorite. Take it to the park. It's my favorite thing to do in the summer. And so I welcome everyone to put those in the chat as well. And right now, as we're opening up the space and doing some housekeeping, we will have a couple different presentations today. And we do ask folks to either ask questions in the chat as they might come up, or to ask questions at the end of a presentation. We'll hold space for Q&A and those folks will be queued. We ask to make sure that everyone's mics are turned off so that speakers can present uninterruptedly. And any other housekeeping needs, please let us know. Again, if you have any concerns about the recording of this Enuentro, please privately message myself or Irene Burga. And after this housekeeping moment, we're going to dive into a recap of the Inflation Reduction Act, different offices, initiatives, funding that has been created through this landmark legislation, specifically covering climate justice issues, clean air, sustainable communities, water equity, and ocean conservation topics. Then we will have a discussion around these new initiatives, new incentives, things of that nature. What is working, what isn't working. We're going to be using the platform Mentimeter to have an engaging conversation around the first year of the IRA and its impacts on nuestras comunidades. Then we'll be transitioning to hear some remarks from Joan Cato, who will speak on Colaborativo 40, which is our new program we're rolling out for Justice 40. Then we'll recap our amazing summit that we had earlier this summer, uplift upcoming events like our Advocacy Week for Hispanic Heritage Month in September, and also hold space at the end for our members to share any announcements, updates, opportunities to connect with one another, and anything else that they might want to raise in this space as well. So with that, we'll transition to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Irene, the Climate Justice and Clean Air Program Director for GreenLatinos.
Gracias, Dharma. And hi, everyone. I love seeing everyone's favorite summer beverage in the chat, and I'm getting a lot of ideas. I didn't know there was an iced boba. So yeah, that's exciting. And I am going to dig in a little bit into the beginning of kind of our overview of the IRA. And as Dharma said, we have like an exciting couple of presentations following that's going to dig into more specific pieces on clean energy and water, and then on a Green Latino specific program. So just around the IRA, just to give kind of an overview, the Inflation Reduction Act was a package introduced last year, a year ago this week, that included $370 billion towards climate and clean energy funding for the next 5 to 10 years, $270 billion in the form of tax incentives. So the structure of the IRA is mostly through cherries, not sticks. So it's through incentives, and they're doing it through sort of a restructuring or utilization of our tax, like our tax structure. And most of that is through, claiming rebates for EVs, claiming rebates for energy efficiency upgrades, solar panel installation, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also incentives for local government and also for communities to get some of the funding for specific community projects. And so that, looking specifically at the Environmental Protection Agency funding, and a lot of the funding structure is allocated through the various federal agencies. So you'll have some funding go through the Department of Energy, and then some through the EPA and other agencies. And specifically in the EPA, we have $27 billion going towards the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and $3 billion going towards environmental and climate justice grants. The environmental and climate justice grants, as many of you probably know here and many of our partners and members have applied for, is money that's up for grabs for community-based projects. And there's a lot of different kind of like sub grants in there that includes like the Thriving Communities Grant and others. And what the EPA has set up is a system called the TIC tax, which are these different sort of hubs to help support with technical assistance to apply for these grants. And I'm going to drop in the chat a little bit of information more on specifically those grants and the TIC tax. And then just also part of what the EPA is focusing on is reducing greenhouse gas emissions by looking at the oil and gas sector through the Methane Emissions Reduction Program, or MERP. And that MERP includes a waste charge fee. So that's a fee. There's some funding for technology upgrades on oil and gas facilities, and then a fee for additional methane waste that's coming from these. And this coincides with the EPA methane rule too, which is also around technology upgrades for oil and gas facilities. So some of the community benefits from the IRA, from the climate perspective, is that there's projected emission reductions of 42% in greenhouse gas reduction by 2030. That's compared to a 2005 baseline level. And this, as we know, contributes to Biden's climate goals of slashing greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030. So this package was I think really kind of going towards implementing some of those goals that the federal government has. And then along with that, I think a really kind of salient and relevant piece here is the jobs opportunity. There's, increased jobs opportunities for skilled labor. So specifically with the huge amount of incentives and build out, especially in the private sector of energy efficiency, EVs, et cetera, there's an increased demand for electricians, clean tech, manufacturing jobs, et cetera. And there's a great report that I'll drop in here by Climate Power. And they kind of broke down what some of these job prospects are. Since I think now the report's a couple of months ago, but there's been 191 new projects accounting for 140,000 new clean energy jobs for electricians, mechanic, construction workers, technicians, and others. And they're for Latino communities specifically, around 50 new clean energy projects that's spurring about $28.5 billion in investment. And then you can see in the chart up here on the right, these are the top states: Arizona, Nevada, California, Texas, and Rhode Island are home to some of the largest number of new clean energy jobs for the Latino community. And then, of course, there's a few concerns that have been definitely come up for some of our partners, our communities, and those are around the permitting reform threats. There were components of the IRA, we have to call it out, that were absolutely not great, including some of the handouts for the fossil fuel industry and oil and gas, and now additional reform threats that are coming in, really trying to gut NEPA, which is one of our bedrock legislations to protect our ability to comment. And then the last one is just around advancing nascent, potentially harmful technologies like CCS and hydrogen. I'll turn it over to Andrea. She's our Sustainable Communities Program Director, and I'll drop some links in the chat.
Thanks so much, Irene. Next slide, please. I'm just going to briefly, there's so many things that we could focus this time on and so much to get through. So I'm just going to briefly run through what have been some of the really significant IRA investments in clean transportation. So the IRA promises major investments into clean transportation pretty much across the board, everywhere from EV purchase incentives to funding for new EV charging infrastructure to programs that will substantially reduce impacts of air pollution from transportation sources, which disproportionately impact environmental justice in frontline communities. The investments to promote EV adoption, those include incentives for personal cars, which are really, really important because if we want to get clean cars on the road across the board and make EVs accessible to a wide range of consumers, those incentives really need to be there. So the IRA amends the tax credit for new EVs to $7,500 and creates a new used EV tax credit of $4,000 or 30% of the vehicle sale price, which is pretty significant for used cars, really seeking to address the fact that the EV tax credit only for new cars was excluding a large percentage of the population that buys used cars. Additionally, there's been huge investment in EV programs for trucks and the USPS Clean Fleets program, which is $3 billion to create new USPS clean vehicles and charging infrastructure. Additionally, there have been really significant investments specifically aimed at reducing air pollution from transportation sources, which accounts for the biggest proportion of greenhouse gas emissions. So these two programs, which are the $3 billion Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program, which funds infrastructure to reduce air pollution from service transportation, and the $60 million Diesel Emissions Program, which specifically targets emissions in environmental justice communities, is incredibly significant. Also because it acknowledges the fact that the EV transition isn't going to happen overnight, and that in the meantime, we need to take serious steps to mitigate the harmful impacts of pollution from gas-powered cars. It's really, really, I just want to take a moment here as we're looking at, this set of numbers on the screen, and really, acknowledge that it's hard to understate the potential that these investments have to transform the face and the function of all sectors of transportation. If this money is put to good use, it'll push us forward in a really significant way and help support the efforts of states that are seeking to create achievable and equitable clean transportation in their states. So we really just need to, this is sort of a call to action. We just need to make sure that we're keeping policymakers at all levels of government accountable and ensure that these monies are reaching our communities. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Val to discuss IRA investments for water justice and ocean conservation. Thank you.
So through the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're seeing a historic $15.4 billion investment, which is specifically targeting the Western U.S. ability to be resilient against. And so the overarching goals for the Biden-Harris administration are to be able to alleviate water scarcity while simultaneously being able to water infrastructure development, which coincides with, the well-being of communities and the ecosystems within the Colorado River Basin. So this could be done through the immediate reduction of water demand, as well as maximizing water resources and the long-term would be to protect the Colorado River communities. And so despite these goals, however, there are in fact some concerns that are related to the actual implementation of this program. A lot of these initiatives are done through a voluntary and short-term basis. And some examples that have already come up is that many imperial irrigation district farmers and ranchers within the state of Colorado have not been participating in these water reduction initiatives because they're being asked for compensation of over $400 of unused water per acre foot, but the federal program is currently only offering about $150 per acre foot. So some have also argued that voluntary are not going to be enough to be able to maximize those water resources, especially when you consider the tapering back of the drought saving measures due to the increase in snowpack levels that have been seen in 2023. So next slide, please. And so in terms of climate action, I also wanted to touch on this, was that the IRA and the BIL provide a significant funding opportunity for ocean and coastal initiatives. And so this could range from decarbonizing ports, enhancing coastal resilience, and the promotion of offshore wind development. So some of these investments can be seen through the $3.3 billion that have been designated for funding in particular. However, a significant portion of this funds are competitive, and that brings into question how this money is going to be directed towards frontline communities with limited resources and capacity. And that's something that should be considered because the IRA, along with the Ocean and Climate Action Plan, has the overarching goal to make the U.S. into a leader when it comes to ocean justice. And so as an aside, it's also important to note that the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or BRIC, grant program through FEMA has also been able to provide opportunities for community to respond to climate disasters. And so we've been seeing that from last year, the total request from across the 55 states, territories, and the District of Columbia has totaled over $4.6 billion. And the sub-applications that for money that has been set aside specifically for tribal governments has totaled to more than $56.2 billion. So now I'll pass it on to Dharma.
Thank you so much. So for the sake of time, there's, like folks have mentioned, we could do multiple encuentros around each of these different program areas and policy issues and dive even deeper between each one of them. We could sit here and talk for hours, but we wanted to provide a brief overview just to get folks' gears moving and grooving as to what funding programs and benefits are coming down the pike with the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law in the past year, and get folks reflecting on what could be improved, what's not addressed, and where we can go from here. And to create conversation in a way that's kind of accessible for the virtual space, we're going to do a mentor meter activity to get a lay of the landscape of how people are feeling about the Inflation Reduction Act overall, and then have use the Mentimeter platform to also have some short answers on where we can think the Inflation Reduction Act and impacts to our communities can improve, or where it's doing a great job, and have some candid conversations around that as well. So if folks could scan the QR code that is on the screen and or type in menti.com into their laptop or their phone and put in the code there, that should open up into the Mentimeter presentation that we have. And I'm going to ask Cumbia to go to the Menti presentation for me. So let me know if this isn't working for y'all. We're still figuring out Mentimeter. So if it is working, definitely give me a thumbs up with the emojis or throw it in the chat. But just to get a lay of the land, I'm going to ask everyone to take a moment to scan the QR code or to put in the numerical code into menti.com. And the first question is going to be from 1 to 10. How would you rate the success of the Inflation Reduction rollout so far Thank you, Laura, for giving me that thumbs up. And we created 3 different categories. So we have 1 to 10 on environmental and public health impact. So we can think about here emissions reduced, avoided deaths, avoided asthma attacks, other illnesses, things like that that are unique to the Latino community. What would the success be of the IRA so far in terms of community engagement for our communities? That can look like workforce training, language justice, outreach to our communities for various organizations and projects. In the application process for grants and funding as well, we can think about the success of engaging our communities for applying, receiving, and maintaining grants. And that also kind of leads into the final corner. And as folks put in their ratings, the triangle, and I do see it adjusting, so I think it's working, the triangle will move and morph to the average of what people are putting into those 1 to 10s. And so far we see that environmental and public health impact is rating on average out of 4.7 out of 10. We see community engagement around there as well, around 3.8, and funding for communities impacted by the climate crisis out of 4.5. So I'll be honest, it feels like we're not really feeling the IRA at the moment, or there's a lot of opportunity to improve the mechanisms and processes of the Inflation Reduction Act and make sure that benefits and investments are flowing into our communities rather than being stagnant or just not going to the people it should be going, which are the communities disproportionately bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And if we move to the next slide of the Mentimeter presentation, I'd love for folks to expand a little bit more on, their ratings when they rated 1 to 10 in those different categories, and what our communities need to maximize the implementation of the IRA and federal dollars. What is our agencies, funders, intermediary organizations doing right? What are we doing wrong? Where can we improve and reflect? And so as folks put in their short answer responses, the screen will populate those thoughts, and we can have some discussion, and would invite folks to come off mute or expand in the chat some things that come to mind. So we'll wait for a moment for the slide to populate. So we're seeing here, what do our communities need to maximize the implementation of the IRA and federal dollars? Oh my God, it's coming in. Okay, yay, this is working great. We see technical assistance, community outreach and engagement is things that we're looking for to maximize the implementation. There's voices highlighting not having to compete with polluters for these federal dollars, making it easier to understand how local groups, what they do and can't qualify for, offering and creating opportunity for direct one-on-one support to secure funding for shovel-ready projects, community engagement via mailers, multilingual TV commercials, more technical assistance, information in plain digestible English and Spanish language and other languages as well, free technical assistance and free legal advice with grant tracking forms, etc. Let's see. I think a lot of commentary and themes around lack of awareness of what funding opportunities are available, the timelines for relevant funding opportunities and how to move those work forward, additional capacity at all levels to apply for and administer funds and to do the work on the ground. In DC, sorry, can you pause, Cumbia, and slide a little bit up? That's perfect. In DC, they're beginning to see electric buses, and they're not sure if the IRA is being used for that and to remove lead pipes, but frontline communities are not seeing that money. if we can scroll a little farther down. Okay, so I think some consensus is, oh, can you go to the slide that we were at? Cumbia, more technical assistance, more free technical assistance, additional capacity for our organizations and for communities to see through and to execute the projects that are being applied for and that money is going towards. We also see other similar trends, language justice, having things in multiple languages, so awareness of the opportunities that are at play. And wondering if for the next couple minutes, if anyone would like to come off mute and maybe provide some examples of what they're seeing on the ground, what's been working or what hasn't been working. I invite folks to maybe expand on anything that they added in the Mentimeter platform.
Okay, I guess I'll add a couple of comments.
Thanks, Paul.
One of the things that I'm seeing is that a lot of municipal governments, especially the ones that don't have the financial capacity to hire a sustainability director or a grants administrator, don't know how to secure funding. And I know the EPA has the Technical Assistance Center for my region, Region 2 of the EPA, New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. It's We Act for Environmental Justice, who's been helping, schedule one-on-one meetings with sustainability directors, or who will be the point person in city government, village government to, I guess, have these conversations. But a lot of cities, towns, they just don't have the capacity to be forward thinking of doing protection of water infrastructure, but also to have the vision of how to decarbonize facilities or to really implement funding. So it's tough because like I think that's really that ecosystem that needs to be created. I wrote the comment about the direct one-on-one support to secure funding for shovel-ready projects, because I guess you could say the municipal governments know what's happening. They know where the zombie homes are. They know where the transportation deserts are, but they just don't have the professional capacity from staff. And I know it's systematic. The communities, EJ communities became EJ communities through systematic barriers. But I think it's really about I think really the federal government should really think about how to really provide that one-on-one support to municipal governments in priority communities, the Newark, New Jerseys, the Mount Vernon, New Yorks, the communities that really don't have the, I guess you could say, the ecosystem around them to help them create the private-public partnerships to help secure funding.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your experience and what you've been seeing on the ground in kind of the Northeast tri-state area. And we act as an intermediary that is filling some of that gap in the area as well. Wondering if other folks have had similar experiences, or if anyone else would like to echo any remarks that have been made.
Hi, this is Edwin with Luvanos with Citizen Energy. I agree with everything that Paul just said. We work both on the West Coast, East Coast. I think one of the biggest challenges is this first year, the administration was pushed to get these programs out as fast as possible. And however, they couldn't cut corners, right? They needed to follow all these regulations, FAR regulations. And so it was very difficult for community organizations or just folks at the community level to organize themselves to quickly respond to all these new regulations that they were required to respond in order to get funding, tax credits, programmatic, whatever support. So that's what we've been seeing. We work with a lot of, we try to be that bridge between those federal programs and community organizations and infrastructure. And so in us working with community organizations, we just don't have enough time for this first round. So what I would suggest is let's get organized. I think for a lot of these programs, the deadlines have already passed on the EV infrastructure, NEVI, and well, NEVI's on the state level, but for example, the community charging program, that deadline passed. You got, the greenhouse gas reduction fund that's coming up. States are organizing themselves at the local level. That's going to be coming up very soon. I think let's try to get organized as much as we can. What's left of the year in this cycle of all this funding, water, energy, pollution. But let's really try to organize ourselves for the next funding round. Last thing I'll say is that I've seen across the board, state by state, that the largest organizations, the traditionally large organizations, are the ones that have gotten the first round of funding. And local officials and federal officials get asked this question: well, what happened with, small businesses? And it's hard for them. And the Justice 40, and some of them are trying. It's just for this first round, it looks like they went with the safest, most prepared, which again is not our communities from a systematic standpoint. So that's my feedback, sort of echoing what Paul said as well.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for those remarks, and Paul as well. And I see some folks resonating in the chat. And go ahead, Beatrice.
Yeah, I'm calling in from rural Colorado, and some of the things that we've seen around the IRA and some of the rural communities where we have large percentages of Latinx community, but they're not the bulk of community, right? Usually more urban areas tend to be a little bit more progressive. And what we've seen in a lot of our communities is county commissions and cities that are very Republican and right-leaning do not want Biden money. And that's basically what they say. And a lot of times the cities and counties are the ones that have to go after these funds. And then the political infrastructure doesn't exist in these communities too, like in bigger cities, to hold some of these elected officials accountable. And the ecosystem is just really different than in urban areas, in rural communities. So that's like another part and a very complicated component when your local governments don't even want to go after any of these funds, or that are funds that are specifically Justice 40 or favor communities of color. They just simply, they're not interested in it from a local governance standpoint. So that's also a big thing that we're seeing in rural communities.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, for explaining and highlighting your perspective, especially from the rural perspective. And I see folks agreeing in the chat. And I think for the sake of time, we'll have to transition to the next topic, but it is seamlessly in line with these questions and thoughts and patterns that we've seen in the first year of the IRA implementation process, that there needs to be more built out political ecosystems, more access and awareness of funding opportunities, of organizations and assistance that can bridge and fill the gaps that are at play in our communities. And so with that, I'd love to transition to Irene to introduce Joan and Colaborativo 40. So with that, I'll turn it over to Irene, but please keep dropping y'all's ideas and resources in the chat. We'll follow up with all these key themes afterwards as well, and continue to find more opportunities to connect on these.
Thanks, Dharma. Yes, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Joan Cato. She's the campaign director for an initiative that is in partnership with GreenLatinos and other Latina organizations called Colaborativo 40. Joan has over 20 years of experience in community engagement, especially with disproportionate communities. She worked on the Obama 2008 and Bernie 2016 campaigns. She's led the largest voter registration campaign in 2020 and has led grant pursuits for Fortune 500 firms. And she's a partner at Everyday Voters. So very extensive resume. And yeah, we're very lucky to have her on board for this project. Joan, take it away.
Thank you. Next slide. All right. It sounds like a lot of folks are already familiar with Justice 40 and its intent. Justice 40 is a significant and a historic investment by the Biden administration to try to get 40% of all federal government investments to go to historically disadvantaged communities. And that can be broadly defined, as some folks mentioned earlier, especially in the Mentimeter So it can include rural communities, people of color communities, LGBTQ folks. So it's people who have coming from low income as well. It's very broad in how it's defining disadvantaged communities. And like previous presenters mentioned earlier today, it is the categories of investment include climate change, clean energy, energy efficiency, but they really flow through like all the agencies within the federal government. So you're talking everything from HHS to NOAA to Commerce to Department of Ag. So it's not just within the EPA, not just within the Department of Energy that these grant opportunities exist. Next slide. All right, so we're going to play a little video about Justice 40.
The Biden-Harris administration committed 40% of federal climate and clean infrastructure investments to under-resourced communities. And racial equity must be at the forefront of climate investments that prioritize the most vulnerable, rural, urban, and historically neglected communities. We must take action now to protect our communities and climate by ensuring the Justice 40 initiative centers community solutions for climate, environmental, economic, and racial justice.
Next slide.
The Biden-Harris.
So Colaborativo 40, Collaborative 40, is a first of its kind investment and first of its kind collaborative within the Latino community to focus on organizations that are Latinx focused in serving, such as environmental justice organizations, businesses, universities, unions, elected officials, and so it's made up of approximately 8 member groups, everything from Unidos, HACU, Hispanic Fed, LACLA, Latino Justice, GreenLatinos Mana, and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And its purpose is to help the Latin community get our fair share of these federal grant dollars and try to make the system a little bit easier to understand and try to streamline it as much as we can. Obviously, we can't, there's still going to be all the requirements that federal grant dollars have, especially in the application and the reporting process of it. But we're going to try to make it more palatable, more easier for folks in the community to really try to figure out how we can get a piece of those grant dollars. Next slide. So I'm going to jump into a little bit about the federal grant process, just to kind of demystify it as much as I can in a short presentation. So to the left of the screen, you see the federal government's perspective on the grant cycle. You have the pre-award phase, which essentially is for us, the application. That's when the notice for funding opportunity comes out. That's when all the templates come out for the actual grant, and there's a review process within the application. Then there's the award phase. So once you've applied and you spent all that time working on those grants, there's finally awards decision. They put out the notification that these organizations will receive these awards. And then there's a post-award phase, which I think is where a lot of other community-based partners come into play. And that's on the implementation, the reporting, the evaluation of the program, at communicating about it, and finally closing it out. I'm going to talk more so today about from the applicant perspective. There's many ways to participate in trying to get a grant. You don't always have to be a prime. And I think that's one of the things that, a lot of smaller community-based partners, frontline community organizations don't have enough capacity, the availability, the resources to actually be a prime. But there's other ways we can help be a part of the team and maybe get a piece of those dollars. So I'm going to go through some of the roles within the application process, as well as some of the responsibilities. So there's the grant writers. Those are the people who will write those grant narratives and the overall application for the most part. You have your primary, which is the organization, be it a business, be it a community-based partner that will actually be submitting the grant. And then you have your secondaries, which I heard a lot of folks mention in the Mentimeter. We need more help with technical assistance. So you have your technical assistants, your technical experts come into play here, communications experts, public affairs firms, community partners. That's how we might be able to also get involved. And you have project management, which is a huge responsibility within this whole process, because as you all probably know, some of these grant, like the RFPs, the requests for proposals, are sometimes 30, 50 pages long. And they can be quite intense. And they can include a lot of things that if you don't read it very carefully, you get marked down just for example, not putting the application in the right font, which can be very disheartening if you spend a lot of time working on an application. And that's one of the reasons you get disqualified. There's also application reviewers that you should have somebody review the application before you submit it, just to read it for its entirety and to kind of check it against the notice for funding to make sure that you're actually going after the right grant and you wrote what was sufficient for the notice and for the RFP. Budget, which I mean, I think that's pretty explanatory, but hitting as many line items as you need, but also making sure that you have the local funding or matching funding to get those grant dollars. Because sometimes you can just apply and there's no qualification for matching funding, and sometimes there is. And then there's the letters of commitment, which is where the secondaries usually come more into play. And that's where you might provide a letter of commitment saying, hey, I'm a technical expert, and if this organization were to win this grant, you know, I commit to work with this organization. I commit to work in this capacity. The same for community-based partners that might be interested in the grant opportunity and participating in the submission. This is how we would come to play. We might do outreach, we might do communications, or we might even provide technical assistance ourselves. And then you also, to present a strong application, a lot of times it's recommended that you have a letter of support from an elected official. And that could come in the form, it should probably be somebody on the state and local level and not somebody on the federal level, especially when you're going after some of these federal grant dollars. And then on the flip side, implementation, once you get the grant, there's all these other qualifications that you have to meet. Everything from evaluating and reporting, making sure you're compliant with the grant, and project management. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a few little recommendations I have if you're looking to get started. And you could be part of a team. And that's one of the things I would emphasize the most. You don't have to do it alone. And if you do it alone, you're probably not going to be as successful as if you did it with a team, with other organizations, other businesses, other community-based partners. So number one, start early, build a robust team. You can't do it alone. You can't just have one person in your organization do it. Ensure you get your UEI and your cage number early if you're going to be the primary. And I would recommend every organization just going and trying to do that on their own to get that set up. You can do that for free at sam.gov. I know that there's plenty of grant notices and applications forms that everyone can access. And if there's a particular grant that you're interested in, there's also like webinars that are associated with that particular grant. There's forms that have everything from the budget to the narrative that you can use, so you don't have to create a form on your own. So that makes the process a little bit easier than it could be. But like I mentioned earlier, you always have to read the instructions carefully. You could get nicked for something really, in my opinion, not as important, such as font. And if you have the money, hire a grant writer. I mean, that's somebody to temporarily add someone to your team to make sure that you can present a good application. So you don't have to bring somebody in on a W-2 status. You can maybe bring somebody in on a 1099 to help you write that grant for that set period of time. Setting roles within your team so everybody knows their roles and responsibility earlier on, and consider having a deadline, an internal deadline about a week prior so you can review the grant and make sure you're presenting the best application possible. Also, make sure you know who's submitting the grant, because even if you have the best application, if you don't turn it in and you don't turn it in on time, it doesn't count. With that, next slide. We have a grant survey that folks could go ahead and scan. And if you're interested, figure out how you can participate in our Colaborativo 40 grant process, what role you can play, so we can maybe be a little bit more strategic in setting up opportunities for collaboration. So we're going to take about a minute right now for folks to go ahead and fill that out.
So as folks are filling out the survey, we can send it to people afterwards. Wondering if you might want to take a question or two, and then we'll transition on.
That'd be great. Does anyone have any questions for me about the grant process? Go for it. I think Paul.
Do you provide presentations for mayors and I guess regional governments?
I guess if they would like to be a partner, we could try to have them collaborate and give them some best practices. I know, for example, certain cities are trying to figure out that process on their own and trying to work together to set up a Justice 40 type group to have a collaborative approach towards trying to get some of the federal grant dollars into their city. But yeah, we're happy to have them fill out this form as well, so we could try to help out with a little bit of matchmaking, because they might be the best one to actually submit the application, and then your organization might be able to participate as being like a partner group that would help them with the implementation or the strategy for how they're actually going to implement it, to make sure that renters, for example, might be able to get a little bit of the benefit of solar panels.
One idea is that we recently partnered with the Rio Grande International Study Center to do a Justice 40 event in Laredo. And many of the government entities in the Rio Grande Valley attended, as well as universities and businesses, to have a broad set of presentations on Justice 40, and then look for collaborative opportunities. Because like you said earlier, a lot of, while we assume that cities are ready for this, big cities, yeah, they've got grant writers, they've got everything they need, they've got the research, the analytics, et cetera. But the smaller cities, they don't have that, and they don't have the experience. They're not used to being a primary. And so a lot of that is very difficult. So there was a lot of significant questions and need out there when it came, especially to the smaller cities and the smaller Latino serving under-resourced cities as well. So thanks for pointing that out.
Hey, Joan, I was going to suggest, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat, and people can direct any questions to you, but because we are a little bit short on time, so we can get moving. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Thank you so much. Then thanks everyone for your engagement and questions in this. We'll go ahead and turn it over to the water team to give just a recap of our 2023 summit in San Antonio.
Yeah, thanks. So, we just wanted to give some time to give a huge thank you, obrigado, gracias, to all the members that were able to join us for our in-person 2023 3 National San Antonio this past June. So really excited to, be able to come together after 2019 was the last time that there was the summit. So it brought together over 230 members of our comunidad, and it represented 28 U.S. states and territories, as well as 111 organizations that are doing work across the continent. And also, we want to take some time to thank the 17 generous sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be able to award over 90 full and partial scholarships, and that almost triples the amount of scholarships that Green Latinos has been able to provide in terms of any previous summit. And so we're also proud to say that we hosted 46 speakers and activity leaders the 3 days, and we were able to hear informative and meaningful presentations from local and national speakers, as well as champions in the movement who shared their inspirational stories for our familias. And just to touch on professional development, participants were able to receive training in terms of seeking federal grants, as well as advocating and finding purpose for our work, and shared resources, including reports on programs and campaigns from networks on actions and the impacts those have on our comunidades. Lastly, members were also able to come together to build programs and provide visionary feedback for the future of Green Latinos. And as a comunidad, we also were able to take some time to find joy and healing. We danced together, ate together, and explored San Antonio together, as well as sang along with a live Selena tribute performance. So once again, thank you so much for attending, and thank you for all your feedback. And it wouldn't be possible without the members. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Yeah, and just echoing, that was such an amazing, impactful week. So appreciate everyone's energy and participation. And if you can go to the next slide. Okay, great. You're at it. So I just wanted to give a quick plug for another upcoming event that we have coming up September 25th through the 28th. We have our annual Green Latinos Hispanic Heritage Month Advocacy Week. And we just wanted to give a shout out to that and a plug. It's going to be a powerful fly-in to Washington, D.C. We'll be hosting an advocacy training, direct meetings with decision makers, elected officials, and federal agency leadership to amplify stories and demand change. So this is kind of letting y'all know that we're going to be sending around interest forms via our email list. So make sure that you're on either the Climate Justice and Clean Air or any of our Colectivo email lists or the Green Latinos list. And you'll be getting more information in the coming couple of weeks on how to sign up for that. Scholarships will be made available for travel and lodging costs. And again, we have kind of a limited amount of spots. So we'll be hosting also a Green Latinos Live Awards event. And that's sort of our annual recognition event for leaders and champions in the movement. And it's just a really good time. We'll be celebrating our 1-year anniversary launch of the Latino Climate Justice Framework as well, which many of you were a part of. And we launched last year at Hispanic Heritage Month. So yeah, we hope to see many of you there. And I'll turn it over, or actually, Cumbia, if you can go to the next slide. And so with the last remaining time that we have, per usual on our encuentros, we wanted to open it up to the group, the audience, our members. This is what we do it for. So just, feel free to come off mute and feel free to share anything that you are working on, anything that has sparked thought or conversation in your head from the discussion and dialogue we've had on this encuentro, any announcements, opportunities for action, or any thoughts at all. So we'll give the floor to the group and feel free to come off mute if you have anything to share at this time.
Today is Green Latino's 15th anniversary. It is our kickoff of our quinceañera year. So you will be receiving your invitation to quinceañera events, and come join us. Green Latinos Live will have a quinceañera theme If you want to dust off your old dress, put it on, and let's go. So happy to mention today, August 15th, in 2008 was our officially became a nonprofit. It's flown by.
Thank you.
Lauda's signing up. She's already got her dress ready.
Yes, our quinceañera. So is the day officially today, Mark, or is it like it's today? Wow. This is just synergistic.
Yep. It's also my half birthday, so let's, roll with that as well. My kids taught me to appreciate half birthdays.
There you go. Thank you for all the felicitaciones in the chat. Yeah, does anyone else have anything else to share? Did anyone, go to the summit? Any reflections from that? Or go to our advocacy week last year?
Hi, this is Lou from Friends of the Inyo, Lou Medina. How are you?
Hey, Lou.
Just something that we're working on. It's more around access to public lands, but we spotted a trend among, and I think I've shared this with Irene one-on-one on a phone conversation, but there's a trend among the national parks to go cashless and require payment of entry fees and fees for reserving campsites be done by credit card only, and it includes a couple of the national parks in our area. So we've teamed up with a local federal credit union that's a CDFI, and so we launched an outreach called Naturaleza, Conectividad y Crédito for Latino Conservation Week, and we're actually going to replicate it at our local Tri-County Fair at the end of this month and the beginning of next month, because that creates a barrier to access for, I think, a lot of Latinos who are unbanked or don't have credit cards. So this is an opportunity to help them establish credit so that they can access national parks, and then also it opens up the door for anything else that credit can help them out with. So we're trying that out. We're hoping that we can have a lot of people actually apply for credit during the Tri-County Fair, because a lot of Latinos go to the fair, and see if we can help them out that way. So it's just something that is a little bit different, and it's a nonprofit and financial institution partnership that we're trying out.
Thank you, Lou. And if you have anything related and connected to that opportunity that we can share out in our post Encuentro recap email, feel free to send it to us or drop it in the chat.
All right.
I appreciate your advocacy on that issue. And I see also Samantha is plugging, for those in DC, there's a Climate Justice Organizer Festival in Malcolm X Park, Saturday, August 19th. All are welcome, so thank you for that. We see a couple additional comments here. The Center for Action on Environmental Justice is fighting to keep green spaces open to the community. Please help us out with the donation. So there's some information there. Nominations for America's Most Endangered Rivers are now open as well, from Chantel. Thank you. And a shout out from Laura for all Green Latinos moving to DC. Hit her up. Great. Well, thank you everyone so much. Yeah, we'll be sending out an Encuentro recap email with all the information. If you have any ideas for future Encuentro topics, please email me or Dharma. And also wanted to give a big thanks to the other programs that were involved in this Encuentro: Sustainable Communities, Andrea, shout out to the water team, Maritza and Val, and thanks everyone so much for your energy, and Joan for your wonderful Colaborativo 40 recap presentation as well. So, all right, have a great day, y'all. Bye.